And I really want to go back to Craig's point about being a learning lab, because that's really what this is. That's what the REL is all about. And again, I did not pretend to think that I could sit at my desk and write a plan on how best to implement this. And I need you all to be part of this so that we can get the best ideas and the best thinking from across the district. Again, Dr. Stephanie Wilkerson was going to be here today to present some of this, but flights were all canceled. She's from Virginia, and they were actually, Charlotte canceled all flights yesterday. So she's like, I can't get out. I'm like, it's okay. We got it covered. So again, I'm just going to briefly go through the timeline so that you are informed about what we did last year, where we're going this year, and then at the end, I'm going to kind of recruit you. You know, when I used to introduce myself as Business Intelligence Coordinator, I told people I was a spy. Well, I'm going to recruit you to be part of the CIA, the Collaborative Inquiry Army. So I guess now I'll actually become the head of the CIA, right? So this handout's going to go over the things when we get to this year. But just want you to know where we've been and kind of where we're going. So last year, we had 3 big things. One was the Laura Lipton workshops, which we got such positive feedback about that last year. I think like 90% agree and strongly agreed that those were very beneficial. And so we were able to get those back again this year. And then we had about 140 attend those 2 days. Then we had an expanded alliance of about 41. And you want to talk about a lot of frustration, a lot of, you know, I know I like people to just tell me what to do, but that's not what this was. We were all like learning together, struggling together, trying to figure this out together. And we started with a fishbone analysis. So 41 people in the room, representative of middle schools, you know, we had principals, APs, we had lots of central office, we had literacy teachers, literacy coaches. So tried to get as diverse as we could. We probably actually were too large. I think that caused some of the frustration, but I was really committed in making sure that we had the diverse perspectives in the room. So when we did the fishbone, looking at barriers to effective data use, these were the things that were discovered. First, we had technology challenges around data collection. That's kind of why I asked Craig, well, how are you collecting the data on the walkthroughs? Data use preparedness, limited capacity to transform the data into action. We had a lot around collaborative inquiry. Again, I'm not going to read these to you, but these are in green because we ended up with 11 barriers, but you know that we can't tackle all 11. So then we had to prioritize, and so the 3 in green are the ones that the group prioritized, and then we developed logic models for. And I'll be happy. This is a Prezi. I can send it to you. Data analysis and interpretation. Talked about how the right people aren't always at the table. And then there were just some others that didn't fall into the, you know, the 5 that they had decided. About formative assessment, lack of time, alignment, resources. So once we had our fishbone completed, we did that on June the 4th. On July the 16th, we were actually supposed to move into something called innovation configurations, but because of where the group was and from their feedback, we punted and changed our plans, which if you've ever worked with an IES grant, I mean, like the federal government has to approve this stuff months in advance. So they don't really like it when we change it, but I told them, I got to do what's best for us. So then they work with us and we get it changed. Again, we prioritized 3 of the 11 barriers and worked to create logic models. These are still what I would consider rough drafts, but we're going to be using this work to inform the work we're going to be doing this year. Not going to go into a lot of detail, but you'll see the top 3 barriers identified were the lack of structures, protocols, really a common language for collaborative inquiry. You know, it's even kind of like the word differentiated instruction. We all talk about we want differentiated instruction, or even going back to student engagement. But what is that? Developing that common language about what is it when we see it. So that was one of the big barriers. Lack of trust throughout the district as an organization was a second barrier, and a lot in the book talks about you have to create that psychological safety so that people do feel comfortable enough to share, especially when they disagree with something that's being presented. And then we have just lack of direction, follow through, role definition, and this kind of goes back to walking the walk, making sure that we're modeling what it is that we're wanting to be implemented. So that work was done last year. The other thing that was done last year, which actually we'll talk just briefly at the end, is we were part of a pilot to validate a data use survey. Across the nation, there isn't a survey for data use, for gauging kind of data use for educators. We worked with Jeffrey Wayman and some other researchers and did some cognitive interviews and pilot tests of that survey. That's been submitted to IES and is in review. Once they review it, hopefully they approve it, then we will own that survey, but it'll also be shared nationally, because then we'll finally have a survey. And we're going to use that to kind of gauge where we are and then where we go. So we'll use that for benchmark and monitoring progress. So that brings us to today, because last year when we had everyone together, we kept hearing some needs, some feedback that came up. So, need district support of partnership. And so we're working to get central office commitment. Fred talked about how we're working with executive staff and working with getting them to attend and be part of the partnership. Need a plan and tools. So that's where we're going to talk about the innovation configuration workshops and what in the world does that word mean, because I'm like, anytime I use that word, people glaze over, but I'm learning it with you. I've heard about it. It's from Dr. Shirley Hord and Jean Hall. If you know anything about concerns-based adoption model, I know like this much about it, but I'm going to learn about it with you so that we can develop that common language for collaborative inquiry. We need a way to evaluate the collaborative inquiry, and that's where the data use survey is going to help inform our implementation. We need to provide more professional learning around collaborative inquiry. That's how we were able to get the workshops again this summer, and need to build principal capacity for collaborative inquiry. And we are going to have they call it a bridge event, and it's with Dr. Jeffrey Wayman around leadership strategies for basically leading your staff to use data. Now I'll tell you more when we get to it. So this is kind of our timeline. You'll see the innovation configurations, and these dates are on here because the way that we decided to do it this year is break up into smaller groups and to ask for volunteers. So as I go through kind of especially the innovation configurations and the evaluation plan, if that's something you think, yeah, I really want my voice to be part of that, I really want to be part of that, kind of make a note, and at the end I'll have sign-ups. So you'll see the first thing we have is, why are innovation configurations important? When I talk to people about innovation configurations, I tell them it's basically like a rubric, but there's not an evaluation tied to it. I think that's why they didn't like to use the word rubric, because anytime we hear the word rubric, we go into evaluation mode, and that's not the purpose of this. The purpose is to develop a common language so that we know what it looks like when we see it. So it defines the practices that we want to see in the schools. It provides a continuum. So you'll have, this is the beginning. We won't call them levels 1 through 5. We definitely won't do that But the innovation configuration group will come up with some categories where it's kind of beginning to transformational. You want to?
This is killing me because I know Shirley Board and I know the CDAM model, so if you don't mind, I can add something to it.
Please, come on. Do you mind to use the mic only because we're recording? All right, perfect. Because, I'm punting for Stephanie. Stephanie's more of an expert in this than I am. Like I said, I'm learning right along with you all.
Molly understands my compulsive order. Anyway. Okay, so on innovation configuration, it's 1/3 of the concerns-based adoption model. There is a part of that that's called stages of concern. And so it is, as anybody going through a change process, they give you about 7 stages starting with 0. And just by listening to conversations or engaging those conversations, when you do your cycle of inquiry, you can sort of hear where people are on whatever it's going to be. So that's one piece of it. The second piece then is levels of use. By listening again to those conversations, having that inquiry, you can understand where they are in whatever this change process is, where they might be in implementing whatever it is you want. The innovation configuration is up front and developed to say, here is what it would look like if we put this into place ideally. And whatever the components are of what it is you're trying to implement, you'll have them, maybe 3, maybe 5, whatever. This is ideal implementation. Will we get results if we do it this way, which is maybe one step less than ideal? Yeah, we will. And it might look this way. What stages might I hear? What kinds of things would I hear in the levels of use? So it is a great tool based in that whole model to help to move people through to the ideal state that you want them to be in. Some things are okay if it's not ideal. Some things are absolutely not okay. So if I'm a teacher and I'm implementing something in my classroom, I can look at the innovation configuration. I can say, oh, wow, I didn't do that part or whatever. And you can use that as a guide and as a map in having your conversations around the table. Let's pull out the innovation configuration map. What evidence do we have that this is taking place or it's not taking place? Or you got what kind of result and somebody else got a different result? What was on that innovation configuration map that would help say that? So I just had to say all that.
No, I
thank
you for jumping in.
And I'll sit down and be quiet now.
No, feel free to jump in. Like I said, I'm in the learning lab with everyone else. So I'm punting today for Stephanie. And we're actually going to be bringing in experts from CEDL. And I forget what that stands for, like Southeast. I don't know what it stands for. But that's where Shirley Ward and Jean Hall work to develop this. So again, the REL is going to provide us with the best experts in the field to work with us so that we can learn it from the best. And I'm all about learning from the best. So this is kind of an example that, going back to Susan's point, you see the dark lines there. She talked about the fidelity lines. So what we'll do is we'll take the innovation configuration team will take collaborative inquiry, you'll break it down into different practices. Then, like I said, we probably won't use the levels 1 through 5 because that's our evaluation system, but we'll come up with some other words. And then we'll just identify, and then the group will decide, well, where is that fidelity line? What's the acceptable implementation level? Here's just an example about cleaning the kitchen. So each time the kitchen's used, dishes include chinas, pots, pans that may be dirty, trash, created surfaces need wiping. So you break down the big component into practice, and then you write the different levels, and again, the fidelity lines. So check fullness of the bin. When the bin is full, puts trash in bag and brings out to the garage. That's where they want everyone to be, but it's acceptable if they remove the trash from the... Well, this is unacceptable, but it's acceptable if they put the trash in the bin under the sink. So that's how those work. Now, this is one, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Eddie, I think Holcomb. She has a book about data teams, and she has some innovation configurations around data use.